This episode of Where Did the Road Go is brought to you in part by our Patreons. If you want to become a patron, go to wheredidtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? Tonight I'm going to be talking for the first time with Lon Strickler, who does the Phantom and Monsters blog, and he has just released a book called The Mothman Dynasty, Chicago's Winged Humanoids. And it's basically a grouping of all the witness accounts from the Mothman sightings in Chicago, as well as some other stuff mixed in there, a lot of people's ideas. It's a very open-minded presentation, and although Lon has his favorite theory as to what's going on, he brings everything into the fold, from really out-there ideas to very grounded, skeptical ideas, even if they don't quite measure up to explaining the phenomena. So it's a very good read. I highly recommend it. And, of course, the Phantoms and Monsters blog is an excellent blog to check out, and just a wealth of cryptid information. So we did do an extra segment for Patreons. Actually, Patreons asked some questions, and I gave them to Lon to talk about. So we have a short segment I'll be uploading later in the week with Lon. Without any further ado, here's my conversation with Lon Strickler. So, Lon, welcome to the show. This is your first time on Where Did the Road Go, which kind of seems weird to me. It seems like I should have had you on long before this, but how are you doing tonight?
Doing fine, thanks.
And for people who are not familiar with you, why don't you give people a little rundown of what you do and how you got into all this in the first place? Because you've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, this is an odd story, I guess, but I actually have been an intuitive from, or known I've been an intuitive for most of my life. I was born and raised near Gettysburg, and I used to spend a lot of time on the battlefield as a kid. And for whatever reason, one day when I was 8 years old, I was there during the summer one afternoon. And all of a sudden, I started sensing all kinds of energy, which I recognized as spirit energy. But there was a lot of other stuff going on too, just like, residual. But, I was hearing sounds, smelling things. All my senses were activated, it seemed. And at that moment, I realized that I just wasn't seeing things like everybody else would. So, that continued on. I didn't really let it bother me. It's not like I saw dead people or anything like that. I just sensed the energy.
Right.
So, I think my parents had a idea that I was a little different as far as that goes, but I never really said much about it. I never even thought about it that much. And, there'd be instances that it would come into play where I would notice something, but I just didn't really let it bother me. I never had problems with it, never had problems with spirits at home or anything like that. So, when I got out of high school in the late 70s, well, mid 70s, I I started doing investigations. Now, back then, paranormal investigations, not like it is, nowhere near like it is now.
Right.
And so somebody needed somebody to help figure out why things were going bump in the night and a lot of other odd things were going on. Word of mouth would get to me and they'd contact me and I'd come in and, see what I could do, give them a suggestion. I did a couple clearings, but not a whole lot. So that was about it. And that was what happened for most of the, until 1981 when I had a Bigfoot encounter. I was I was fishing on the South Branch of Patapsco River. This was in May of 1981, and I noticed this thing on the other side of the river coming out of the weeds. And, I heard of Bigfoot before, but, I never investigated cryptids or any of that part of the paranormal. So, it was a pretty harrowing experience, though. I was very curious. So I had somebody tell me that there had been a Bigfoot flap in the area, maybe about 7 years previous to that, with a creature that was dubbed the Sykesville Monster. So, I really don't know if that was the same being or not. I doubt it, but really got interested in this being. So I actually went back and started interviewing a lot of the people that had an encounter back in the early 70s. So, I got into that. I actually interviewed a lot of people that had never come forward before. So, I did that. Then, I do a couple investigations here or there. Mostly what I was doing at that time was if I would somehow get a hold of a report or an incident, I just make record of it. I never really did much with it. Back in 1988, I got in contact with an old friend I went to school with. He and I had actually been in Boy Scouts together, so he knew I did paranormal investigations, and he was telling me that the old Conawaga campground, Boy Scout camp, there were a lot of bizarre things going on, but in particular, the scouts were hearing these screeching, these crying sounds that were coming, kind of going off into the distance, and they were getting freaked out by it. So he asked me if I'd come up there with him and a friend and investigate the area and see, spend some time there and see if anything happened, see if we figure out what it was. So, long story short, we were there. First night, nothing really happened that much, though. Something came into the campground. We were in three separate tents. We thought maybe one of us was walking around, but apparently it wasn't that. It was something else. So the next day, we had it was nice days. It was in October, and we took a hike through the woods and stuff. Didn't really notice much of anything. Got back about 6 that evening, and we're sitting around the campfire. So about, I don't know, I'd say about 11 o'clock or so, maybe 12. We heard this screeching sound, this screaming, and it sounded like a child screaming. I mean, it was loud, but it seemed like it was going off into the distance and coming back and forth. So, that kind of freaked us out. We didn't know what it was, so we decided, well, look, we're going to stay up the rest of the night. Maybe this thing will come back. We'll get a look at it or see what it is. So I'd say about 1 in the morning, maybe an hour after that it happened, I got up and started walking around the campsite, and we were right along the Conawaga Creek. So I just felt really weird. I felt like something was watching. You get that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I came back and told him, I said, look, I just don't feel right. Maybe we can let's walk down the trail a little bit. So we had our flashlight, and we weren't more than 50 foot away from the campsite. And we all noticed these red lights, these two red lights standing, in the middle of the creek. And the creek was very shallow at that time. And we looked over, all of us noticed it. And this thing shot straight up in the air with like a whooshing sound. And, it was before we tried to get the torch on, I tried to get the flashlight on it, and this thing took off before, but we definitely all saw the red eyes. And it was the red eyes. This thing was dark in color. Two of us noticed it had something along the back, like what we thought were wings, but we didn't think that they were spread out. But this thing took off like a rocket. And when it got to a certain point, we heard the screaming sound again as it was flying away. It was fading off. So the two guys I was with, they freaked out. They left the campsite. They went up to the administration building and stayed overnight up there. I wanted to see what it was. I had no idea what it was, and I wanted to see what it was.
Yeah.
But I didn't. Nothing else happened that night. So I hadn't really said much about that. I told a few people about it over the years. And then I started the blog back in 2005. And I guess about the third year I decided to go ahead and write about it. And I put it in there. And the reason I hadn't said anything, because I knew so many people around this area. It's not far from where I actually live now. I was living near Baltimore at that time. And I moved back to my hometown about 2 years ago. But I just didn't really want to say a whole lot about it because I know people would read it and just think I'm crazy.
Sure.
So, but I put it up there anyway. I went as detailed as I possibly could. So a couple of weeks later, a gentleman who lived near Dick's Dam, which was about a mile upstream from there, contacted me and told me, he said, for a long time I've been hearing that screaming sound. Had no idea what it was. He said, this first time I read this, anybody's ever mentioned this before. So not long after that, I got another email from a troop leader, and he told me, he said, about a year ago, I was out with my troop on Kanawag, and they were actually camping not far from where we were. And he said the kids went up the trail one day. It was during the daytime, and they came running back, and were all freaked out, frantic, and all, and told me that they saw a dragon. And they said this dragon had feathers and, you know, all kinds of, it was all kinds of crazy stuff they were talking. And, he thought they were just playing with him.
Right.
So he just discounted, but he said they were kind of, the whole weekend they were kind of wary. So, he wrote me back and told me what he was told. And now he believes he actually did see something. So anyway, this this being, which I dubbed the Conawaga Phantom, was also seen. Oh, I don't know. We've had about 5 or 6 sightings since 2008 that have been reported. I mean, up and along the Cold Conawaga Creek. The creek runs for about 12 miles altogether, but this thing's been seen in various locations along the creek. So the actual descriptions that people give me are very close to what people have been seeing in Chicago. So I kind of believe it's something very similar to what people are seeing.
Now the book you just put out, what is the title of the new book?
Mothman Dynasty: Chicago's Winged Humanoids.
It covers more than just Mothman in Chicago. It covers it covers a lot of those reports, but it also you branch out to other similar reports like the one you just talked about that you had yourself. And of course you can't, I mean, the Mothman term comes from Point Pleasant. How similar do you see this outbreak in Chicago to the Point Pleasant incidents?
Well, as far as the description of the being, it's not very similar, other than the way it flies and the red eyes. It's interesting. When I started reporting these sightings, I was calling it the Chicago Phantom, but nobody wanted to call it that. Everybody wanted to call it the Chicago Mothman. For obvious reasons, they wanted me to believe it was something similar to that was seen in Point Pleasant.
Right.
So I believe that these flying beings, these winged beings in Chicago, are probably related to the Mothman, only in the fact that it's probably a being from an alternate reality. That it's not an indigenous being.
Right.
And in fact, I have received a lot of reports over the years of Mothman-like sightings. This is something that's been going on, you know, even before Point Pleasant. So, this is nothing really new, but there are different descriptions of these things. I mean, they run anywhere from the moth-like wings to like an owl wing, or the gargoyle bat-like wings that most people in Chicago saw.
Right. So were there a lot of other, with the Chicago sightings, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of other high strangeness, UFO sightings, stuff like that. It seems to mostly just be this creature.
Yeah, and that's something that we thought was kind of weird. Chicago itself has always been known for a lot of paranormal activity, but especially UFO activity. The Lake Michigan area has had a lot of anomalous UFO, USO activity over the years, well known for that. And, we kept an eye on the UFO databases for the most part. And from what we could determine, the sightings of UFOs in Chicago during the period that these winged being sightings were taking place kind of waned off compared to what we usually get. Now, I don't know why that is. I don't know if people just weren't watching for them, but there has been one phenomena that has happened during that period of time, are these flashing lights.
Yeah.
There were a lot of flashing lights south of the city. And then since the sightings, there had been a lot of different colored flashing lights all around the city, even up into Wisconsin, even over into Michigan. So this is, I don't know if there's a relationship to that, but it does seem kind of odd.
Now, when you say flashing lights, what are people describing?
Well, it's two things in particular. That there's like a large flash in the sky that people see, almost like you say it would like be a thunderstorm, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
You get that type of flash. Then more recently, there have been these multicolored orbs, a lot of multicolored orbs, and it's just not large orbs in the sky. It's a lot of ground level orbs as well. That activity with the ground level orbs isn't unusual with cryptids. Here in Pennsylvania, in particular, we have noticed a lot of white orbs associated with Bigfoot sightings. These beings these Bigfoot would be seen, and these lights would accompany it, or somebody would go into the area and investigate a Bigfoot, and they'd see these orbs. So it's got to be a connection there somewhere.
And that's the type of orbs people would see, like in the olden days. That would be like the will-o-wisp type of thing.
Yeah, like almost like ball lightning or something like that.
Yeah. Like myself, I've seen flashes of light, almost like a camera flash, around weird events that have happened in my life, and I've always found that very weird. Like, I've never known quite what to make of it, but I've never heard a lot of other people having that experience.
I don't, since was going on during some of the early sightings in Chicago, the first thing I thought was, well, maybe it's a doorway of something opening up, some type of gateway or portal.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the reason for the large flashing in the sky, but that's just, that's subjective. I mean, I could really kind of put that to anything, but it was kind of bizarre. It was happening south of the city like that. There was no other reasons behind it. There was no other phenomena associated with it. So, the closest thing that could be associated with people seeing these flying beings.
Yeah. I just wonder what can cause something like that. Now, it's not, when I would see it, it would just be a bright, like I said, like almost like a camera flash, like everything would light up and then it would fade out.
Exactly.
But it seems like there were people seeing like multicolored lights too, right?
Yeah, that was later on. And that was all through the city and all around the city. And In fact, most of those sightings were after our last sighting in 2017, which was late October. It seemed around late November and December, there were a lot of different lights being seen. In fact, there's a lot of green lights being seen. People were kind of saying, of course, it's a meteorite or something like that. Well, these things just weren't falling directly to the ground. They were stopping and maneuvering and doing all kinds of things. So, these just weren't meteorites.
Right. Okay. And there was a meteorite that fell right before all these sightings started.
Yeah, there was one. There was a meteorite that actually went into Lake Michigan, and we looked into that too. We haven't discounted that. Some of the investigators on our task force believe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, but the question would be what?
Yeah, well, that's just it. What?
Was it Eileen Rosemary Guiley who said maybe it triggered the opening of a portal or something?
She mentioned it. Her and Nicole, who is also Grajek, who's also in our group. Those two believe that it may have something to do with it.
And how do you feel about it?
I don't know. I'm kind of either way. I can understand where they come up with that, but I'm not really. It's not one of my top reasons.
Okay.
It's interesting. When I wrote the book, I wanted to get everybody's personal opinion, and to put it at the end of the book.
Yeah.
Everybody that was in the group. So, it kind of adds to it. I mean, it kind of gives you a better idea of what we were all thinking. And I'm telling you, we were brainstorming the whole way through this thing. So,
I'm sure. The group now, who made up the group? How did you put this together?
Well, I was looking for investigators in the Chicago area. So Manuel Navarrete at UFO Clearinghouse, he was the initial. In fact, he gave me the first report and many subsequent reports. So he and I were working on these. Then Vance Nesbitt came in on it, and then Nicole and a few other people. We had Tobias Whalen and Emily, his wife, were also involved. They live in Madison. So the group altogether, it comprised of approximately 10 people. We had people come and go as as the investigations went on, but we had a core number of people that were working with us. So, a lot of them were doing the legwork in the city when a sighting would come up, and they'd actually go to the locations. But Manuel and I were doing most of the actual interviews by phone.
Now, what was the first report you got?
The first report that we received was the report in Oz Park, where the woman was walking her dog at night. She's professional, and she walked up on this thing. It was right in the middle of the park, just standing there, red eyes, 6-7 foot tall, huge wings extended past the top of the head, over the back, and freaked her dog out. Actually, she had a Jack Russell Terrier, and you know how they are, and this thing just cowered behind her. It was scared, and it was standing there in the park. It turned around slowly, saw her. She saw the red eyes, and it just jettisoned the air, got to an apex, spread out its wings, and left out the scream. And that's pretty typical of what this thing has been doing.
And sometimes it makes noise, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. So not all the time, but sometimes it has made noise.
And that seems weird to me. It's interesting that the descriptions are similar yet different, like distinctly, like that. Like sometimes people are saying there's no noise at all, and other times people are hearing that whoosh sound or a screaming noise, and it's just what other sounds have been associated with it aside from like the whoosh and everything?
Well, the only other sound would be the Bowling Brook encounter, where the woman was walking in the into the playground, and she encountered this thing, and she heard a gurgling like sound.
Hmm.
I actually believe this thing was asleep, even though it was standing. And now she never saw any eyes or any facial features, but this thing turned around and she noticed how big it was. She first thought it was two people embracing.
Yeah.
And this thing turned around, slowly turned around, and she realized, this isn't two people. This is one thing, and I had no idea what it is. And it scared her. She took off in another direction, but it physically affected her. She became weak, had to sit down, and had to gather herself before she could get up and go home.
Now, do you think that was from shock, or do you think the thing had an effect on her?
You know, I don't know, but that's not the only time it happened. I mean, we had another encounter on the lake shore where this couple had an encounter with this thing. It actually descended down in front of them, and she lost all ability to stand. In fact, her husband had to carry her into the condo.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, it does seem to have effect on people. Um, some people have this foreboding feeling of fear. Other times it's physical, like a weakness. There have been other times when I don't know. It's just like there had been a bit of shock, but they feel like they have no inclination of taking a photograph. It's like they're immobilized. They can't do anything just for the brief time they see it.
Now, you do have some photographs of this thing, supposedly.
Well, we have the 2011 photograph, and I have no idea what that is. I mean, this very well could be the thing, but it just doesn't meet the descriptions that we have been getting. That looks more like I don't know, like a triangle shaped being, though we've had people that have described it that way, but it just doesn't look like what people have been describing.
Hmm.
So that was actually the first sighting in 2011. This person took this photograph. Um, there were 3 sightings in 2011. That was the only photograph. Then we got a photograph from Melrose Park this year. Unfortunately, it was during the daytime, but the woman who had the encounter, this thing flew right up to her. And as she tried to get the camera and open it up and get it ready, this thing took off. I mean, it was a good distance away from her. She did get a indiscernible photograph, and you can kind of make out something, but it's just hard to figure.
And why do you think it is that people are not taking photos? Do you think it's just that they're not thinking about it because they're thrown by what they're seeing, or?
I think it's just a shock for the most part, seeing a flying being like this, and you know, I don't think the first thing you think is about grabbing the camera.
Yeah.
Uh, but these sightings for the most part have been fleeting. They've been very quick. A lot of them have been at night, so it's too dark to take a photograph. Some people who have had an opportunity to take a photograph for whatever reason just haven't. And and we asked them, well, why didn't you take a photo? Well, I didn't really think about taking a photograph, or I was just so shocked to see this thing. And
And they're not thinking like an investigator would.
no, no way. I mean, I try to put myself in their position too. What would I do if something like this suddenly showed up?
Yeah.
I honestly, I really don't know what I'd do.
I'm not sure camera would be the first thing on my mind either.
Probably not.
I think I would be trying to get a bearing on what I was looking at, honestly.
Yeah.
It would be like, is that a person? Is that what's going on with this thing? What is this? I wouldn't think, hey, where's my camera?
There were 2 sightings that, in particular, I was kind of surprised there wasn't a photograph, but I'm pretty sure that they actually saw something because, and first of all, it was like the Adler Planetarium sighting. There were several groups of people there at the time. We got the report by one group who saw this thing. They described it the way it flew off towards the city, towards Soldier Field. And about a week later, we got another verification of another group that saw the same thing, but none of them attempted to take a photograph. Now, it was dusk, it was just minimal light at the time, but still, there was no photographs. The other one was the day of the solar eclipse, and these people, there were hundreds of people down along the harbor at that time,
Yeah.
And this guy even had photographic equipment out, though he even had filters on there to take pictures of the actual the eclipse. But still, he watched this thing for about a minute and a half, and he just never thought about taking a photograph.
And I don't think that's as weird as people like to make it out to be, though.
Well, yeah, because I just go back to when people have like a Bigfoot encounter. That's I think a lot of people are in the same situation there. They see this thing and they're surprised they're seeing it, and they just don't think about taking a photograph. That's when when I see a lot of these YouTube videos of these pictures of this Bigfoot. And it's almost like they're taking these cameras out there and they're ready for it. It kind of makes you think, come on.
Yeah.
They were sitting there ready. So I don't believe this was true. This was actually something that happened. I mean, it makes you question. It makes you question the evidence, but who knows?
Now, the feeling of dread. What percentage of the cases did people get that?
Some of the early ones, maybe a few of the late ones. I'd say maybe 20%.
Okay, so it wasn't super common.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't something that happened to everybody.
And it seemed like some people thought it was a positive thing, like it was, warning them away from things.
Yeah, this is where you get into the harbinger of doom, portent of disaster thing that a lot of people associated with the Point Pleasant Mothman. I don't buy into that. I think what happened at Point Pleasant was something that, just going to happen anyway. It was I don't think it was a warning of any type. There were 46 people that died on that bridge collapse that day. It was right before Christmas. Small town. People are looking for excuses.
Yeah.
And, when John Keel started writing about it, he kind of wrote it up a bit, kind of used it as part of the story, part of the Mothman prophecies. I just don't really believe that. I have heard for years that there have been other instances where people report after the fact that they had seen some type of flying being before something happened. I guess the best one for comparison that may have actually happened would have been the Blackbird at Chernobyl incident, where there were people that were reporting this flying being above the power plant previous to the disaster. But for the most part, I just don't really see the evidence of this thing showing up for most of these other, disasters.
Yeah. And one of the things you mentioned is you said that the encounters in Point Pleasant continued after the initial the initial bridge collapse, and that I didn't realize.
Oh yeah, they went on for a year or more after, and they still occur. I have had I tried to go back and look at it. I've had at least 20 sightings over the years in the Mason County area where Point Pleasant is, across the river into Ohio, and points south and north of Point Pleasant. So, I mean, something still goes on there. I mean, I've had people who have had actual encounters with this thing after they were in Point Pleasant and later had an encounter with it at another location. So, it's a phenomenon that is still going on.
Okay. Yeah, that I didn't realize. I thought that the lore of it says that it stopped after the bridge collapse.
Yeah, well, like I said, that's the way it was written up in the prophecies. So, it the sightings have continued. Uh,
Hmm.
and in fact, people have been reporting a lot of weird things up and down the Ohio River Valley for years.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, it's definitely a hot spot for that type
oh,
of stuff.
absolutely. Yeah, it's a lot of UFO activity. These flying manta ray shaped beings or bio UFOs have been reported over the years. It's just a lot of strange stuff.
Now, what are those?
Well, this is a phenomenon I've been working on now for about 10 years. I got a report from uh, from West Virginia about 10 years ago of this woman who was, and she had a guy with her. They were in a convertible and they were driving along a river and Elkton, West Virginia, I think the area was, and they actually had this manta ray shaped thing uh, fly over in their car and kept flying in front of them for a pretty good distance.
Hmm.
And it was described as a 6 foot wide manta ray. Basically, it was a manta ray. They had the undulating flight of the flapping of
Yeah,
the so-called wings, and but the shape was that of a manta ray. The skin was kind of a grayish color. I thought at the time it was probably a cryptid, a living being of some type. I don't know now. I have received, I guess altogether about 12 reports over the years of this phenomena. It just doesn't happen in the Ohio River Valley. I've had them in Indiana, California, a couple in Texas, uh, one up in Staten Island. It's a bizarre anomaly. It's always near water. That's
hmm.
one thing, but it's not like anybody has seen it go in or out of the water. Um, and they range in size anywhere from a foot and a half wide to 6, 7 foot wide, and they all have that similar movement that people associate with a manta ray, but they're flying. And I don't know if it's a bio UFO of some type, you know,
Yeah.
some type of engineered living being, or I don't know. It's still a mystery to me. And but the reports have been fairly consistent, and it's just something else that we've been looking into.
And it's not uncommon for UFOs to be described. Even when they look mechanical, people will sometimes say that they felt like it was something alive.
Yeah, I mean, for years I have received reports and even photographs of these shape shifting type of UFOs.
Yeah.
I had a gentleman down in Tennessee who used to send me a lot of different photographs of these shape shifting UFOs. Actually, he had taken them down in Florida as well.
Hmm.
It was fairly interesting, and I have investigated UFOs here in the state of Pennsylvania, and I had a person who took pictures of these UFOs that look like blobs in Wales
Yeah.
or in the UK. It's a worldwide phenomenon.
Hmm. Um. So going back to the Mothman, you have the glowing eyes were fairly common.
Hmm.
What do you make of that?
I don't know. It just seems to be a characteristic that most people have noticed. I don't know. I don't know what it is, why it has these eyes that glow.
A
But
couple
like I said before, it hasn't happened to everybody.
and a couple of people I think said they thought it was just eye shine, right?
Yeah, but it seemed to have more of a glow than what regular eye shine would be. I mean, um, from the people I talked to, they would say I would see it, and it would look like it's in within the color, and the light was coming from within the eyes.
Hmm.
But then you'd get another look at it, and it seemed like it extended beyond that. Like especially when they would look at them. So the one sighting on the lake shore where I told you this couple had encountered this being, the eyes were actually flashing.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was I don't know, flashing, more like it was uh intermittent,
Yeah.
light to dark, from lighter to dimmer and off and on. Um I don't know. I don't understand why that happens, but it's just something else, in Chicago, I believe there's at least three of these beings that were reported in the Chicago area. Very well could have been more.
What now you've kept most of your witnesses anonymous, correct?
Oh yeah.
Um what have most of them just wanted to be anonymous?
Yeah, they have been. I mean, I have tried to talk many of them into coming forward. Some have since then.
Hmm.
The only person that came forward when I first talked to him was Billy Bance, who actually had the first chronological sighting in 2017, in March, um, which was it was in Cicero, not too far from Midway Airport. I mean, and and the reason he came forward was basically he was having some medical issues. He wasn't sure if there was affected. He was affected because of what he saw. He had had an eye disease that developed in both eyes.
Mm.
Fairly rare disease. I saw the medical reports, and it was all verified. I don't know, but he's not sure if that's why it happened because of that. You know, I don't know.
Was it a
But yeah,
like a conjunctivitis type of thing?
no, it was something to do with the optic nerve.
Huh.
Yeah, and it happened on both sides, which kind of seems a little unusual. But the doctors were baffled for a while, but that's what they diagnosed it. It's a real long name, but like I said, I saw the reports,
Okay.
and he had a few unfortunate things happen in his family during this period too. His mother suddenly passed away. A few other things were going on, so he was kind of concerned about it and wanted to know what I thought about it. But he came forward. Actually, I talked to him on our radio show, and he talked to a few other people. So he wasn't shy about telling people who he was. There was another sighting at the Owl Bar over in was that Logan Point, Logan Place, that area of the city, where he eventually came forward and talked to Vice.com when they did a report,
Mm.
and he talked to them. Some of the other witnesses came forward and talked to people in my task force. Uh, you know, all the witnesses were verified by other people in our task force.
Right.
Yeah. So, in fact, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, I gave her all the names and contacts, and she followed up on it. So the fact that people want to say that I kept the witnesses secret and something I was making up or to that effect. Well, no, they've all been verified.
Right. Right. And it's understandable when you're seeing something like this that people may not want to be, put in the spotlight.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Now have some of the have people like weeded out some of the witnesses or something like that?
I have, I didn't put all the sightings in the book because I had some questions. I guess the one sighting that I had the most questions was the one supposedly where this thing leaped off the Willis Tower.
Mm.
I had some questions about that. I wasn't really sure what he was telling me is what he really saw. And then some of his descriptions of this thing actually like shape shifting in the air and, you know, going from a man to like an insectoid type being. And
Mm.
I just wasn't buying it. Um,
Although
I eventually took the report out.
that's not totally out of characteristic, however, for a UFO sighting.
No, I wouldn't think so. But I just we had our investigators go there, and they stood at the same spot he said he was standing at, and looked up. And quite frankly, I don't see how he saw anything.
Hmm.
I mean, it was just so far away.
Right, right. Well, actually, what I was referring to was is there some issue with witnesses being harassed as well?
Yeah, that happened. Uh, Billy Vance in particular, he had complained to me that some some other people were harassing him after he came forward. And I don't discount what he's telling me. I believe it what he's telling me is true.
Mm-hmm.
Uh some other witnesses later on have been found out. That's why I'm kind of being more general with the locations, so people aren't going through the neighborhoods and talking to people and trying to figure out who the witnesses were. So I put a stop to that because people just, these witnesses would call me and tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
And, their wishes were to be kept anonymous, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and you're not giving the information out. It's just people are figuring it out and on their
Exactly.
own. And if anything, I would think if they, if someone goes and does that, even though they shouldn't, it is kind of verifying that these witnesses actually exist.
Yeah, that's true. And, it's just that I just don't buy into that. I've never done that to anybody, and
Yeah.
for others to come out and say that, it kind of rubs me the wrong way. So,
Yeah. Well, that's understandable. Um, Now, have there been any UFOs sighted with these creatures in Chicago?
just one.
Just one. Okay.
The the sighting out on the lake. There was a sighting in, I forget the name of the area, but it was approximately a mile and a half offshore. Several of these people were on a boat, and they saw two of these beings flying together. And this was the first time, the only time where two beings were seen together.
Hmm.
Um, the the woman told me that she had actually seen them do like figure eight maneuvers, and it was at dusk. It was fairly dark yet, but it was light enough in the sky she could kind of get a backdrop on it. So after she had seen this, then she noticed along the horizon a green streak of an orb or whatever. I think she may have seen a meteorite, but I'm not sure. I'm
Okay.
not positive.
Well, that would make sense, I guess. Um, and how do you? And I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit. How do you
Mhm.
go around vetting the witnesses? Like, what are red flags to you?
Well, it usually first I listen to what they got to tell me, you know.
Mhm.
Uh, and I always make an attempt to talk to them in person. So of course I'm calling them and talking to them first. If they don't want to talk to me, then I usually discount it.
Mhm.
I do want to talk to them. I want to see how they reacted. What it was, what they described, why they believe what they saw, and probably the most important is I try to get them to embellish on the story just to see where they go at. But I tell you, that's one thing about these witnesses that has surprised me and Manuel as well. They don't embellish. I mean, I have had witnesses where I have inferred with was it this and that? No, no, it's what I told you. You
Hmm.
know, they refuse to embellish on what they saw, which is kind of unusual. That just doesn't happen a whole lot. Um, encrypted sightings in particular, you can kind of prod a witness to kind of change a little bit what they're saying, but that just has not happened. And I believe that they actually saw something.
Hmm. Um. The fact that they're not changing it, do you find that odd though? If you normally can get them to change their story?
Well, if they start changing the story and start going along what I'm trying to tell them, then I've got questions.
Right.
But the fact that they don't change the story and their original story lines up to what we've been hearing, and even though they had no idea that this has been going on, that's another thing. Very few of these witnesses had any idea this was going on in Chicago. When you tell them, that's when they'd be absolutely shocked, and you could tell in the way they responded that they had no idea.
Right.
So it's not like people were hearing about it then calling us. That didn't happen. I think of only one instance where that may have happened, and I discounted that story too.
So let's. What are the similarities in the descriptions? Because there seem to be. I think you said you think there's 3 different creatures.
Well, the only reason I say that there may be 3 or more is because the locations kind of like in pods. Like we have 7 sightings in this one general area, 4 sightings in another, 5 or 6 in another area.
Mm-hmm.
We got a lot of them down in northwest Indiana. For that reason, I believe we have several, and there are some slight variations as far as the way they react to people. Some seem more aggressive than others are. But quite honestly, not one of the sightings seemed like this thing was trying to hide from people. I mean, it was out there making itself known.
Which seems odd too.
That does seem odd. That does seem very odd.
What are the similarities in the descriptions?
5 or 6 foot tall, very thin body. Wing structure for the most part is bat-like with membrane, like would say it would gargoyle, but be bat-like wing structure. A head that has kind of a point to it, kind of conical in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that's the most. Of course, some of them had the red eyes. The main difference that I have noticed in some of the descriptions is some have the attached arms and some have detached arms. In other words, some of these beings had arms that were not attached to the wings, and some had wings that were attached to the arms.
Right.
That's probably the main difference. So, of course, if that's the case, at least we got at least 2 different types. But I think it goes beyond that.
What do you mean?
I think there's more than that. I think there's definitely 3.
Okay.
Just by descriptions, the descriptions of the beings along the what area was that? The industrial area. I keep forgetting these names of these areas of Chicago. Wasn't very familiar with Chicago, but looking here.
Mm-hmm.
In McCook area.
Okay.
There were 3 sightings in McCook area, and they were all near a river. And those sightings were a little bit different than all the other ones because 2 of the witnesses noticed like hair on the body.
Oh.
Like a brownish hair on the body. And they were all daytime sightings. And I hadn't heard that from anybody else. So they also described this thing as having a kind of like a crown coming from the top of the head, though others didn't mention that. But this crown in particular seemed to extend along the back. So that was a little bit different.
Okay. Um, well, so MUFON has also been involved in this, and what are your thoughts on their involvement?
Well, the earlier sightings came from MUFON,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't really seem to be interested at all until I started looking into it. And for some reason, they figured, well, we better start looking into this as well. Well, I don't know how much you know about MUFON, but basically MUFON, they're more on the skeptical side more than anything else. They do not do what they say, and I've been told this by people higher up in MUFON. We don't do paranormal investigations. Well, that's kind of bizarre because I always thought UFOs were paranormal.
Right.
They're not normal. But basically, we don't do cryptid investigations. That's what it is.
Mm.
And if it involves a report of a flying being or an alien or whatever, they do cursory investigations. So all this was going on in Chicago. I believe the Illinois uh, director kind of got a burn his butt and figured, I'm not going to let somebody else do this without me having my 2 cents into it. So he started getting involved, and he was just trying to throw a monkey wrench in the whole thing. But and actually he's involved with a group. He's kind of put together a ragtag group, and they're kind of going around trying to discount what we're investigating. But I kind of expected all that. That just isn't. I knew there was going to be pushback to some degree. And I'm used to that. So let them say what they got to say.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Now some of the explanations. I mean, MUFON threw out a couple saying it was a bird sighting and a kite at one point as well.
Yeah.
And you kind of shot these down pretty easily.
Yeah, I did. And I wanted to make sure I got that in the book as well. The kite was just ridiculous. My father owns a hobby store, and we used to sell these gay kites for years since the 70s. And I knew the model he was describing when he was talking about it. So I actually went, and my old man doesn't throw anything away. I went back in the storehouse and found one of these things. And I had some of the catalogs too, and this wasn't a kite. And in fact, I went, and now this is they're talking about the first photograph that was taken back in 2011. And I went back and checked the winds in Chicago at that day, and the temperatures and everything. Well, the wind gusts weren't even that much more than 3 to 4 miles an hour that day. There's no way you're going to keep a kite up. Even in the middle of the city, come on, give me a break. That was just an excuse. Then this bit about the blue herring, the great blue herrings, and you know, uh, there's no way this was a bird.
Right.
It's just no way. I mean, I've heard that explanation so many times from so many people. It's almost comical at this point.
Now,
So yeah, it wasn't a great blue heron.
one of your task force said that he thought a few of the cases could possibly have been a bird.
Yeah, Tobias Whalen. He mentioned that he thought they may have been. You know, he, I told him. He asked me about it. When he gave me his summation, I said, if that's what you think, put it out there. I'm not going to discount it.
Mm-hmm.
You have a right to give an opinion. He believes it may be possible that some of them could have been. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that because I just don't see the correlation between the two. But you know,
And that's how the original Mothman was often dismissed. Was it a sandhill crane for that too as well?
Sandhill Crane, yeah,
Yeah. Even though it made no sense to the reports whatsoever.
no,
So let's get into some of the other things you have presented here. I know you lean toward that these things are actual flesh and blood, but the idea of these being some sort of form of thought form or tulpa, I find very interesting.
Yeah, that's just one of the working theories we have going on. The sightings in the little village area were interesting for a lot of reasons, but the people who were seeing these things were calling them like black devils and something to that effect. It was more of a cultural thing, I believe. Little village that people don't know is an area of the city. They call it Little Mexico. I mean, I don't know what percentage is Hispanic, but it's a high number. And all the witnesses that we had come forward to us were Hispanic, but they were very religious people. They were very scared of this thing. First thing they thought was a demon. Um, but there's a lot of other things that may have actually been involved as far as maybe cults or occult activity, possibly a conjuring or a type of summoning of a being. We're not discounting that, though. It does seem kind of out there. Uh, thought forms are basically a manifestation of a being by an individual. Nothing, not much different than what a poltergeist is. But this would be something that would be that would manifest where you could see it. Now, I don't know if I really buy into that a whole lot. It was intently discussed among the task force, and we all agreed it was possible, but it's not something that's really not really part of what we believe is actually happening. You had to excuse a train that's going by. I'm right beside a railroad track.
No, I can't even hear it. So let's talk about the Jeepers Creepers factor in this.
Yeah, that's kind of bizarre. I think people are trying to find a way of describing this thing. And this isn't the first time I've had people tell me that they saw something and that they related to the creeper from Jeepers Creepers. But in the Chicago sightings, there were quite a few of them. So I actually wrote one section of the book about these Jeepers Creepers and wanted to explain to people what about the movie and the whole thing behind the movie and what this being looked like. And I had that I received that description a lot.
It's really strange. You got to wonder if where the people who made the movie came up with that idea.
Yeah, I actually looked into that, but I couldn't really find anything of what I just think it was something that was made up, you know, just a fictional character that came out of whatever, out of a story or such.
Hmm.
But then again, all legends have a basis,
Right?
some truth behind it. All the years I've been doing this now, almost 40 years, I don't discount anything at this point.
Oh, what was I just going to ask you? This thing is, flying creatures are in our historical legends quite a bit as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk a bit about that. I mean, you related it to everything from like H.P. Lovecraft to various ancient legends that talk about these flying creatures.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot out there. I mean, I could probably put much more in there about that. I didn't want to really flood the book with that,
mm-hmm.
but I tried to pick a few examples that may very well explain what people are seeing and related to cultural legends. When you read it, there is a lot of different things people have have described in history. I mean, and there are a lot of modern cryptids that are described as well, like the Alp and those type of beings, these flying beings that people don't know what they are. I had a few photographs in the book from one from Chile of this like dragon-like being. I have no idea what that was, but people were seeing. But there's also been other examples over the years. The Owlman in Cornwall. That's
Yeah.
a very unexplained anomaly that Jonathan Downes wrote about. It's just never really been explained. But multiple sightings in this one area.
Hmm. What how do you compare this to other flying humanoid type sightings you've received over the years?
You really can't compare it to much of anything I've received before. It's just so different. The fact that it was an urban area, all these sightings took place within like a 6 to 7 month period. The largest concentration of these sightings since probably Point Pleasant. Very similar being, but not different than some of the other sightings that have been going on down in Florida, Texas, Ohio, around the same period of time.
Mm-hmm.
We've got three. I had 3 sightings in Pasco County, Florida, that I've been investigating. Had one just a couple weeks ago. We got an investigator looking into that. Very similar, very as far as description and mannerisms. I have no idea why these things are showing up like this. There have been sightings in the past. The Chicago area itself has had sightings in the past. Even with these pterosaur-like beings. I mean, they've been seen as well. But the concentration has just really brought it to light, and that's the big fascination. Why does things show up in such a multitude in an urban area from all places? I mean, I don't think a city, even one as large as, I mean, let alone the one as large as Chicago, has ever seen anything like this.
Yeah. Now, could it? I mean, is there any chance that it could be people pulling a prank?
Well, if this was some type of conspiracy, they did a hell of a job. That's all I can say. I don't know how somebody could do this. We've taken into consideration, people in suits, drones, and I just don't see where it can happen. I mean, I think the the most compelling explanation against that is, we had these sightings along the Chicago River downtown. And if this was a guy in a suit jumping off a building, and they don't call it the Windy City for nothing. I mean, he'd have gone splat up against the building. There's no way he could have controlled the flight that people were describing.
Mm.
I just don't see it.
And I guess the same would be true if it was a drone, where you wouldn't be able to do some of the stuff with it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've never had a case where anybody's seen anybody controlling anything, and a drone would leave some type of engine noise of some type.
True. True.
Yeah, and drones don't flap their wings, and they don't have red eyes. They don't look back at people. So.
It seems like it's something potentially someone could create, but it would take an enormous. It would really be pushing what we're capable of on the consumer market anyway.
Yeah, if it was manufactured, I want to definitely meet this person because they've got a great career ahead of them.
Now, could it be some kind of a military thing, like an experiment?
It's always something you got to look at. Why they would do it in Chicago would kind of make you think a bit. Why they were doing that. You know, out of all the areas in the United States where to do military type of testing, you wouldn't think Chicago would be one because there's very few military installations even around Chicago, let alone even within a 100-mile distance. It's not known for much military, you know, type of installations or facilities.
Hmm.
I mean, it's conceivable that there may be some type of involvement with the military, but I don't know. That's really going on the fringe there. I just don't know how they would be doing that.
Okay. What would you say if you had to put money on it? What do you think is going on?
Well, I tell you, like I said before, I've been doing this a long time. There's a lot of unexplained phenomena that has happened in the cryptid world. You know, this this theory of interdimensional or alternate realities, I believe there's some basis to it. I can't explain it, but I personally believe a doorway was opened somehow. I don't know if it was done intentionally, it was done by accident, if it was some type of quantum computer particle accelerator type of, you know,
Hmm.
experiment of some type that went haywire. I mean, there are two particle accelerators in the Chicago area. One is well known at Fermi Labs. I don't know if it has something to do with that. That possibility has been brought up. We have thought about that. We have looked into that. We haven't discounted that. So,
Hmm.
who knows?
Okay. All right. Um, let's see. Did I have anything else about the Mothman? I guess the only other question I had that I put down is there was one that you were talking about that you did put in the book where it seemed to mutate in flight,
Mhm.
and that again brings to mind the whole UFO thing where you get UFOs that tend to sort of shift as they're going along.
Yeah, I guess the one incident in particular was kind of interesting. This was something that happened a year or so ago on uh on the tri-state tollway, where this gentleman had this what he described as a being, a human, walk out into the road and suddenly sprout wings and take off.
Hmm.
That was kind of bizarre. That wasn't a direct report. That was something we found,
Okay.
but I found it credible enough to make note of it because just by the way it was described, it actually wasn't that much different than a few other reports I've had over the years, where these humanoids would sprout wings all of a sudden, or something that would manifest into another type of being. Um, but why that happens, I don't know. But it was just pretty bizarre.
Hmm. Okay. The have you had any sightings reports since the book has been published? When did the book come out, by the way?
The book came out December 12th. Uh, I did make note of the last report we had in 2017, which was the couple that were approached at Piotrowski Park
Hmm.
in Little Village. That happened on October 27th. I got that into the book. The book was published on the 12th. Now, since that time, I had an earlier report, given to me of an encounter in Forest Park of a by a retired police officer from Michigan who was visiting his mother. He was getting ready to go back to Michigan. He took the dog out for a walk, and he encountered this what he described as a dark gargoyle with red eyes
Mm.
on top of a roof of a warehouse, a low warehouse, maybe like one story. I found the guy pretty credible. I really did. You know, he actually described it like a police officer would describe something. You know, we've had police officers make reports throughout this thing. We had one in earlier in with him and his son were in a park. This was an Illinois state police officer, state trooper, and of course the Auburn and Gresham sighting with the two police officers, in which the officer swears he made a report, and we did several Freedom of Information Act requests and received don't have the report always within about 2 days, which never happens with a FOIA request. Um, so, you know, it was almost like they were flagging the things when they were coming in. We made 4 different requests. All of them came back. About a week after that report, one of the residents that was there at the time verified the policeman's report. His report was like that of a police officer. You know, it was almost like he was writing it down on a report of anything else that he would encounter. But anyway, we had that report in Fowler's Park. There were 2 sightings south of the city, one in Wilmington, Illinois, and the other in Lexington, Illinois. These are sightings we're still investigating. One includes both include military possibilities. The second one in Lexington had troops involved, where the witness noticed after he had seen this thing, and the directions this thing flew to was in a wooded area, and that these troops actually disembarked from military vehicles, went into the woods. He heard shots. They came running out and took off.
Huh.
He has no idea what's going on. There's been a lot of black helicopter involvement with some of these sightings. It's like I said, it's something we're looking into. There was another sighting in Chicago beginning of this month in Forest Park again. A couple were coming off the train, the Green Line, around Harlem Avenue, and they saw this thing standing there, described as a tall human, dark in color with large wings. And they took off, scared them, but they were, you know, Manuel actually had an interview with them. 2 professional people, no reason to lie, no reason to even come forward. Didn't want any notoriety. And now we're getting reports up in Wisconsin. I just got done taking a report, though it was about a year and a half ago, up near Whitewater. And we got 2 other sightings we're looking into in Wisconsin. And we had an older report that came forward from Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. So, you know, it's expanding. And, you know, I'm starting to add some of these sightings away from the city, like a radius like 100 miles or so. I'm adding them to the map, to the interactive map. So, you know, I'm taking all this into account, and we're going to investigate them.
All right. Okay. So, first of all, where can people get the book?
Well, you can go to Amazon and just, you know, search Mothman Dynasty, or just search my name, Lon Strickler, and it'll come up.
Okay. And how many books have you published so far? 6. 6. Okay. And of course, Phantoms and Monsters is one of your things.
Yeah, I guess that's the main thing. Phantomsandmonsters.com. It's I guess the nexus for all this stuff. So, you know, we have a free daily newsletter that we put out. All you got to do is go to the website and sign up for it, and you'll get it in your email.
Nice. All right. Well, I thank you for spending time with us, Lon.
Well, I thank you.
And I definitely recommend the book, and I'm really looking forward to see how this phenomena is going to resolve itself, if it does, or if it just stops.
Well, I'd like to have some answers. I really would. I mean, I wouldn't like to have his hanging. But, you know, it's it's like anything else as far as weird phenomena. You just don't always get the answers, and well, most of the time you don't get answers.
Yeah. And a special thanks to our Patreons who are pledging at the $10 or above level. John Eddy, Chris Elmquist, Christopher Vaughn, Patricia Giaquinta, Allison Cook, Robert Groom, Christopher Sheehan, Mark Brady, Roland Belstedt, Kevin Shrek, Super Inframan, Alfred Tuttle, Carla Mahoney, and Gabriel Zero. Thank you very much. All right, there was my conversation with Lon Strickler. And if you want to hear the extra segment, it's, I don't know, somewhere between 6 and 10 minutes long. I don't know exactly. He fielded a couple of questions, one on dogmen and one on the phenomena itself. Patrons will get that later in the week. If you want to become a patron, it's only $3 to become a patron and get all the extra stuff every month. We're going to be doing a giveaway soon. We have some patron-only shows that were either questions asked by patrons or, in this case, one of our $10 patrons participating in a conversation with Joshua, myself, and Red Pill Junkie. That will be going up very soon. It's a very deep conversation, too. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.